For number 5 through 8, we have rational equations, which means there's a variable in the denominator. I'm going to go ahead and not do all of them. Let's go over to number 6. So what we want to do when we have rational equations is we want to multiply each side by the least common denominator. So for number 6, the least common denominator, well, we see we have a 5, an x, and this one has an x squared. So our least common denominator is 5x squared. And so we'll multiply both sides by 5x squared. On the right side here, we have to put parentheses because this is going to get distributed. So on the left side, 5x squared times 1 over 5x, the 5 cancels, and the x squared, one of those cancels with one of those x's. So on the left, we're left with an x. On the right, this gets multiplied by both, and in fact, it is the common denominator. So when you multiply times this first one, the 5x squared cancels completely, and you're just left with 1, because we have a 1 here. And then on the next term, you multiply, the 5x squares cancel completely, and you are left with 2x plus 10. And then we just have to finish off by solving this equation. We could subtract x from both sides. And at the same time, let's go ahead and subtract 11 from both sides because we have a 1 plus 10. So we're going to subtract 11 from both sides. And it looks like we get negative 11 is equal to x. So x equals negative 11. The only thing we have to watch out for in rational equations is making sure our answer doesn't make a denominator equal 0. And putting negative 11 back in to the denominator doesn't ever equal 0, so that is the answer. Let's jump to number 7. This time we have a couple binomials. When you have binomials, or even in number 8 when you have trinomials, check to see if you can factor first. So in number 7, we're going to go ahead and factor the denominator to k times k minus 2. The next one is just 1 over k, and then on the other side of the equal sign, factors again to k times k minus 2. Which means our least common denominator is k times k minus 2. How do we not factor first? We might have had too much for a common denominator. Like you might have just put k squared minus 2k and k as the least common denominator, and that is not correct. So we're going to multiply both sides by that least common denominator. On the left side, we have to put parentheses because this will get distributed. And so here we go. When we multiply it times this first term, it cancels completely. So we're just left with a 1. But then when we multiply this here, only the k cancels. So we're left with the 1 here, times k minus 2. Over on the right side, it's just one term. The k times k minus 2 cancels completely, so that equals 3. And once again, just like number 6, we're left with a pretty easy equation to solve. We have 1 plus k minus 2 equals 3. We'll go ahead and realize 1 and negative 2 is negative 1, so we can add 1 to both sides. And we get k equals 4. As long as that doesn't make the denominator equal 0, it's okay, and it doesn't. Like 4 squared is 16, minus 2 times 4 is 8, so it does work out. So k equals 4 is the answer. And coming over to number 8, we want to factor this denominator. So we have 1 plus k minus 6 is on top in the denominator. We want to factor this. This is k and a k, and it looks like it's going to be minus 1 and minus 3. and then equals 1 over k minus 1. So our common denominator, I'm going to slide over here, least common denominator. Well, this first one doesn't have a denominator, so we don't have to worry about that. This has a k minus 1, the second one has a k minus 1 and a k minus 3, so we need both of those. And then the last one is another k minus 1. Well, we already have that, so we don't have to add in another one. So we're going to go ahead and multiply both sides by this least common denominator. On the left side, we have to put parentheses. All right, distributing, that just gets multiplied by 1, so it's the exact same thing. Anything times 1 is itself. Multiplying here, the denominator will cancel completely, so we have a k minus 6. And then equals, on the right side, just the k minus 1 will cancel. So we have 1 times k minus 3. And now we have to solve this equation. We'll go ahead and multiply this first one out. That's k squared minus 3k minus k plus 3 plus k minus 6 equals k minus 3. We notice that we have a quadratic equation. So to solve quadratic equations, we want to get everything to one side. First, I guess we'll add like terms. So we got the k squared. We have those three added together is negative 3k, and 3 and negative 6 is negative 3, equals k minus 3. Now we'll get everything to one side, as I mentioned earlier, so we can add 3 to both sides and subtract k from both sides, which gives us k squared minus 4k equals 0. Well, this isn't one of our typical trinomials, but we can go ahead and factor out a k. And so k would equal 0 or 4. We need to check those answers to make sure they work out, or to make sure they don't make the denominator 0. Put in 0 in here, this would be 0 minus 0 plus 3. Putting 0 in here makes that negative 1, so didn't make the denominator 0, so 0 is okay. And then checking 4. Putting 4 in here would be 16 minus 16 plus 3. That works out. And 4 minus 1 is 3. So our answers are 0 and 4. And that's how you solve those rational equations.